QB was all over the place in week 1, but we're going to start with the S tier here. We're going to have Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes did have 20 points in the first game of the season against the Detroit Lions. We're not super worried about Patrick Mahomes without Travis Kelce at all. I mean, it's Patrick Mahomes. He's going to continue to have that upside, as is Jalen Hurts. And I know you can be a little bit more concerned about Jalen Hurts because he did have a slightly underwhelming week for Jalen Hurts standards, having 12 points in his first game against the New England Patriots. But do keep in mind that he was playing a Patriots defense. Next week, he is going and playing the Minnesota Vikings. That's going to be a better matchup for him. And almost any matchup would be better than the New England Patriots in week 1. And then Josh Allen. And obviously Josh Allen did this on Monday night. But regardless of what he did, I mean, we're going to always rank Josh Allen in the S tier. These guys are going to be more or less the same as the season goes on. He's playing the Raiders, and I think he's going to have a field day against them. It's Josh Allen, the rushing upside. You can't not start him. Let's move down to the A tier.
Yeah, so for the A tier, at the top is going to be Lamar Jackson. And we got crapped on for not having Lamar S tier going into week 1, and look how that turned out. I mean, we were still wrong for where he ended up producing, but he was definitely not even close to S tier. And with him going against the Cincinnati Bengals, that's going to be a tough matchup from like a total points perspective, who's gonna end up winning the game. But I mean, defensively, Cincinnati showed that they have plenty of questions, letting Cleveland run all over them last week and score 30 points against them. So I think you gotta be saying the sky's the limit for Lamar Jackson, behind obviously our top 3 there. So we're really excited what he can do as a bounce back after having a really poor week with Houston. Obviously, hopefully Mark Andrews is going to come back, but honestly, from a passing game perspective, regardless, I don't think it's really going to matter for his passing volume. Daniel Jones, we are going to have in this A tier, and this is bold considering what he did against the Cowboys, which was put up 0 points. But when you look at the guy's rushing upside, like, holy crap. He had more carries, he had more rushing attempts than Saquon Barkley did in week 1. He ran the ball 13 times for 43 yards. So obviously not a great average there, but I mean, the rushing upside is there. You take one of those to the house, like, that's great. And now you're putting him against the Arizona Cardinals. You go from literally potentially the best defense in the NFL to the worst objectively. I think you're looking for a really, really high upside week for Daniel Jones and a comeback week. Trevor Lawrence kind of started a little shaky, but he's playing Kansas City, and Chris Jones did just sign a restructured contract with Kansas City, so that is going to bump Lawrence down a little bit. We had him a little bit higher than this. We are going to bump him down because that's going to make everything for that offense, for Trevor Lawrence's offense, more difficult. So, but I think you still have to count on that being a high scoring game and a game where Lawrence is going to do really well with Calvin Ridley and with Christian Kirk and really that whole receiving core. Justin Herbert playing Tennessee. He played fine this last week. He wasn't like the best of the best, but I think you got to be counting on them continuing to take shots downfield. And while all those receivers are healthy, you got to count on Herbert being A tier here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, behind him we have Joe Burrow, and that might come as a surprise. Joe Burrow was the QB 28 last week. We all know how horrible he was. I mean, his line was set at like 263 passing yards, and he went out there and he gave us a whopping 82. His passer rating was 52.2, and he was horrible. But he was worse than Justin Fields. So there you go. Justin Fields is better than Joe Burrow. The thing is, you have to consider the Browns have a really good defense. And the conditions in that game were just horrible. I mean,
horrid.
It was a disgusting game. It was Ohio.
Ohio's a gross mosh. It's disgusting in Ohio. Like, don't ever go there.
That's all we have to say about that. But I mean, in the past, he is playing the Ravens this week. Last year, he played the Ravens 3 times, had about 200 yards each time. But if you go back another year to his first year with Jamar Chase, he had like 425, 500 yards those games or something. I mean, you should pull that up. It was like 525 yards and like 4 touchdowns and second time playing the Ravens that year. Joe Burrow can be absolutely electric against Baltimore, and T. Higgins is going to have something to prove after catching 0 passes on 8 targets. And Jamar Chase, he'll be wanting to really make his way back up towards Justin Jefferson in the yards. Next, we have Anthony Richardson playing Houston. Houston has a decent defense. They have Will Anderson, obviously Derek Stingley as well. But we saw how good Anthony Richardson was last week. Even as his debut as a rookie, he gave us 20 points.
Top 6 quarterback.
He had 40 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. So that's going to give him a really, really good floor. And his ceiling, honestly can be a lot higher. You know, if he even gets that second rushing touchdown at the end of the game, right when they were on the goal line, he's looking at 30 yards in his debut, and he's going to keep doing that every week. Geno Smith, pretty rough last week, but this week he's going to be playing Detroit. We saw they do have some liabilities on the defense there, as we saw in that last Thursday night game. And Geno Smith has 3 really good weapons, 4 if you're counting Kenneth Walker, and 5 with Zach Charbonnet. Behind him, we have Justin Fields. Justin Fields threw the ball probably the most times in his career this last week against the Packers, against the Joe Barry Packers, really. But so he could have done better. But they have some talent on that squad this week. He's going up against Tampa Bay. They have a good front. But, you know, maybe DJ Moore and Justin Fields get something going this week. We all know how good he is, at least on the ground, so he's going to offer you a pretty good floor every week as well. And Tua, honestly, we could have Tua a lot higher. Tua was the QB1 overall. He had 466 passing yards and 3 touchdowns last week.
Tua's in the A tier every week besides this one from here on out.
Yeah, and that's honestly because of Jalen Hurts and what he did against New England's defense in week 1. I think you have to see that continue in week 2.
Yes.
Until they prove otherwise.
And, you know, you could say Tua is going to be pretty hard to stop with Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, but you know, New England was able to stop Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown last week, so we're going to be a little bit skeptical going into this one.
Let's drop down to the C tier here. We'll start with Deshaun Watson. Look, I mean, Deshaun Watson, he didn't play like crazy good in week 1. Like he was 16-29. He had 154 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. So like you're looking at that.
Same conditions as Joe Burrow, though.
Yes. So you're looking at that and you're saying, yeah, but you also not only have the conditions, you also have the fact that Deshaun Watson scored 22 points in fantasy leagues. Why? Because he had 5 carries for 45 yards and a touchdown. And if you're wondering why before everything that happened with Deshaun Watson, he was a perennial top 5 quarterback in fantasy, that's why. Because he has the 50 yards a game or more rushing upside that he will add to his total, and he's going to get rushing touchdowns. Even when Deshaun Watson is playing in a monsoon, he's going to score 21 points. So we have to have Deshaun Watson in a respectable range every week from here on out. Jared Goff as well. Jared Goff, you saw in his first game against the Kansas City Chiefs, he had 14 fantasy points. He threw for 250 yards, but he only threw for 1 touchdown. He did have 5 carries for -1 yard, so that didn't really help him at all. But with Jared Goff this week, you're talking about him playing the Seattle Seahawks, which is a defense
they were just
that got shredded
exposed
by Matt Stafford and Puka Nacua last week. So I'm going to expect a big game from Amon-Ra St. Brown this week. I'm going to expect a big game from Jared Goff, and we have to have him up here as well in a game that's probably going to be, I think it will be a little bit more of a high-scoring game. Those are 2 offenses that have a lot of good weapons, so we'll see how that goes. And then Brock Purdy. And at this point, like you can't put Brock Purdy anywhere below the C tier, in my opinion, because every time the dude steps on the field, he gets 18 to 20 points. Week 1, he was playing the Steelers, so he only had 16.8 points. But again, you're not going to be playing the Steelers defense every week. And going this week and playing at the Rams, we're going to expect him to have a bounce-back week and have a fair amount of fantasy points in all your leagues. Let's drop down to the D tier here.
D tier is a pretty big one here. And we're going to start out with Kirk Cousins. Yes, this may be a little lower than some people like at QB 16 because he did in week 1, even though the Vikings lost, he finished as a top 12 producing quarterback, which is what we expect from him every single week. Top 12, but not much higher than top 12. Like there's just a lot of guys behind him and around him that have higher ceilings. Some of them will be disappointing, but you know what you're getting from Kirk Cousins because of his high passing volume. You can't go wrong with starting him every single week, but you're not going to have a game-winning week most likely from Kirk Cousins really ever until he proves otherwise. So next guy is going to be Mac Jones. And honestly, there's an argument that you could have him higher in these rankings, but we're going to be conservative. We're going to wait and see what this passing volume really is going to look like in Bill O'Brien's offense for the foreseeable future. Can Mac Jones string together consistent 40-plus pass attempt weeks where he threw the ball like 54 times against Philadelphia in week 1 and finished as a top 4 producing quarterback? Who saw that coming? No one. Hardly anyone had him in their top 24 rankings at quarterback because we thought he was going to be as bad as he was last year.
Yep.
Apparently, it helps to have an actual offensive mind and an offensive coordinator.
And not Matt Patricia calling your plays.
And Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Zeke made a big difference.
That is true. So playing Miami, you're going to think that they're still it's going to be a pass happy game where even though Miami might score less than they did last week, almost inevitably because they're playing New England's defense. I mean, you could see Mac Jones and New England's offense kind of countering that play with passing the ball as well. Or maybe they want to slow down the pace of play. Who knows? That's kind of why we have Mac Jones back. We don't really know yet. Dak Prescott going to be next. Kind of same situation, playing an awesome defense. Sauce Gardner is going to be on CeeDee Lamb all day. We really think that Tony Pollard is probably going to get the bulk of the carries there and the workload, and they're just going to try to run that defense until they're tired. So again, I would predict a lower scoring game. Jordan Love going to be at the tail end of this tier. We have him in this tier because we are a believer from a fantasy perspective in what he did last week, which was a top 6, I believe, top 4 producing quarterback and like 23 fantasy points, 3 touchdown passes. Again, pump the brakes a little bit, being conservative with this ranking here, having him as a mid QB2, but really liking the promise from Jordan Love this season.
Yeah, starting here in the F tier, we have the king himself, I guess, of the mid tiers is Derek Carr.
Yeah.
Derek Carr actually started off the year really well, 305 pass yards, a touchdown, and an interception, unfortunately, to go with that. And then brilliantly, he added 4 rush yards on top. But, as you expect, Derek Carr can just, he's going to be one of these guys, week in and week out, he's going to be pretty decent. I mean, 305 yards. He has good weapons. Michael Thomas.
Very good.
Nathan, Michael Thomas is back. Maybe you should start shouting that after
just
week
like
one.
he was last year.
Chris Olave too there. And then even Rashid Shaheed offering some really good deep threat ability. So Derek Carr is going to have the weapons. It's just going to be whether he can get it done week in and week out. We know Carolina's defense is pretty good. So excited to see what happens there. Russell Wilson after this seems to still be struggling. I mean, the Broncos offense only put up 16 points against the Raiders, and their defense was not any good last year. If you remember, even like Jeff Saturday's Colts beat the Raiders. So Russell Wilson, however, 177 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. So maybe if Jerry Jeudy comes back in, he's got Courtland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy. I mean, Javonte Williams is back. But until proven otherwise, we're not really going to put Russ anywhere higher than this. And kind of is going to be the same has to be said about Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield is actually, maybe he's back. Who knows? He was playing against the Brian Flores. Yeah, this is his Drew Brees arc right here.
Brian Flores.
Brian Flores and his Vikings actually. Baker looked pretty decent.
He did look decent.
He always has good stretches.
You have to consider he has Mike Evans, he has Chris Godwin, and this week he's playing Chicago. We saw how good Jordan Love was against Chicago last week. No interceptions, 3 passing touchdowns, and the QB4, you said? QB3 in fantasy. So Baker has a pretty good chance to show out this week, and he could actually end up being someone in fantasy.
Baker finishes a QB.
But I will say Carson Wentz started.
QB11.
Carson Wentz started on fire last year.
Sean Tucker there, so
he does have Sean Tucker.
All right, last tier here. We're going to go down to the G tier or the L tier, as Sam likes to call the last tier in our tiers. Matt Stafford versus the 49ers. And look, Matt Stafford actually got off to a pretty good start last week. He looked pretty good. And he threw for 300 plus yards. Didn't have a touchdown, but that's not going to be the case every week. That said, he is playing the 49ers. So, otherwise we'd have him higher because we're going to expect the touchdowns to go up. But against the 49ers, a tough defense. Kenny Pickett looked like he wanted to play against third stringers again. So I would say that we're going to be a little bit more conservative with Matt Stafford this week. Jimmy Garoppolo as well, playing the Buffalo Bills. Decent defense, decent secondary, but Jimmy Garoppolo is Jimmy Garoppolo in fantasy.
Yeah, but he played well in week 1. Again, he was He was a high-end quarterback too.
He was better than Derek Carr was last year, which again is saying nothing. But he had 16 points, he had 200 yards, he did have an interception, and he had 9 carries for 11 yards. That's bananas. And then CJ Stroud. And CJ Stroud is playing the Colts, so great matchup for Stroud. Obviously, we're going to rank him down here because he's a rookie, because he's still getting his feet wet in the league. That being said, as a Colts fan, I'm terrified that CJ Stroud's going to tear us up this week. So,
I mean, he had a ton of passing volume last week, so if he can capitalize on that against the Colts' abysmal secondary, then you're looking at some pretty serious
Colts did slow down Trevor Lawrence, though.
It is just
week 1,
which is kind of surprising.
That was more the D-line than the secondary.
D-line was amazing.
He had no time to pass the ball. So,
but again, Stroud, there's so much more than 12 players you'd start over him, so he's going to be down here.
Yes.
All right. those are the top 24 QB rankings for this week. Let us know in the comments who you want us to move up or down, but we're not going to do it because these are our rankings. Make sure you drop a like on the video, and make sure if you haven't, you subscribe, because subscribing helps us out a ton. So we really appreciate it when you do that. Head over to flagfantasy.com/domain to join our community, to get all of our rankings, get articles from us and other creators, and all the resources at your fingertips that are necessary to win your fantasy football leagues. Flagfantasy.com/domain. If you use our code DOMAIN, you get 30% off the site, so you should use code DOMAIN, and you also get our exclusive content. We appreciate you guys watching. Thanks for joining us. Peace.